Mindfulness and presence. These are two major modes of practice in our spiritual inner work. Yet there's confusion. What do they mean? What is the difference? How are they related? Mindfulness, presence. They seem to be talking about the same thing. And they have similarities. But there is a fundamental difference. Mindfulness, we're taught that it concerns awareness, pure awareness, choiceless awareness. And it's related to the notion of no self. So in mindfulness, whether it's in mindful meditation or mindfulness during the day, the practice is to be aware of whatever's coming up, whatever's prominent in our mind, in our awareness, in our senses, whatever's most prominent. That's what we bring our awareness to, without choosing what we're going to be aware of. We let the prominence make that choice for us. So in that sense, it's choiceless. Now, that choicelessness is related to this idea of no self. So to really understand this, we have to look first at what is meant by no self. We have in us our personality. This is our sort of standard repertoire, our patterns of thoughts, emotions, modes of action, how we interact with people. It's this whole package. There is this package that we have in us. We know our thoughts because we hear the voice of our thoughts in our mind. It's familiar. It sounds like us. It sounds like who we are. When things happen around us, we may react emotionally. We may feel in our usual way of feeling and reacting. These are the main ways we know who we are. The way our body moves, our modes of movement, our patterns of movement. This is also part of our repertoire. These things are all learned. Some of them may be genetic, but it is a complete package which makes up what we know ourselves to be. And we make a choice. We choose to believe in that, to believe that that package is who we are. That is ourself. Now, this choice that we make to be that, to believe in that, this assumption that that is who we are, is not a conscious choice. It is a choice by default that we come to, that we learn at a very young age, and then we stay with it. It's not like we see some other options. Oh, I'll be this or I'll be that. We only see this one option because it's such an overwhelming package. It's an intelligence. It's smart. It's who we are. This is who I am. The thing is, however, that it's a construction. And it isn't who we are. It's our thoughts. It's the thought I. The thought I is not who we are. Just because this sound of I arises in our mind or we say it, that I, that sound, is not who I am. The subtlety comes in, though, that I may make a choice, and the one who's choosing is I. I may make a choice to say I and to mean what I'm saying. And in that choice, I imbue that sound of I with who I am. So let's return for a moment to this notion of no self. The idea is to see through this package of patterns of thought, emotion, action, attitudes, to see through that it's just a set of patterns. It's just what we call our personality, but it's not who we are. Once we see through that, it begins gradually, but there comes a moment of seeing it for what it is and seeing that this is not who I am, this is not what I am. When that seeing finally becomes clear, in Buddhist circles, that's known as the first stage of enlightenment or stream entry. So after that, we don't believe so much in our thoughts. So we may have some ongoing running rumination happening in our mind. We're thinking this strong patterns of thought, this strong stream of thought. Before that moment of stream entry, we believe in it. We're concerned about it. This is what I think. This is what I must act on. This is what I'm thinking I need to do. After stream entry, we know that that's just our automatic self-perpetuating patterns in our mind, in our heart, in our actions, in our attitudes. And we're not taken by them any longer. So that is the core of the teaching of no self, that we do not have an independent self, a self-existing self. That the self that we believed in all this time, the self that we thought we had, is not really a self. Is just this collection of patterns, these inner patterns. Now let's take another step. Once we become clear about that, something else becomes clear also, or clearer, or begins to be seen. Let's talk about the notion of the witness. So in mindfulness, meditation, or practice, there's this idea that we simply witness what's going on. that there is the witness in us that sees all this. But in Buddhist circles, this notion of the witness itself is portrayed as not really existing. The witness is like no self. There is no witness. There is just the seeing, just the simple awareness. But to ask the question, who is aware? And to say that no one is aware belies our fundamental experience of this. When there's seeing going on in me, I'm seeing this. When there is awareness, I'm aware. This is fundamental. So how do we reconcile these? This I that is aware and this notion of no self. If we look in ourselves, the Buddhists say, we won't find an I. We won't find a self. And this is true. We look around, we see thoughts, we see emotions, we see more subtle thoughts. But we don't find something that we could put our finger on, point to, and say, that's I. One way to understand this and why it's like that is to look at it from the viewpoint of dimensions. We know about space and time. This is where our bodies live. Within us, there is this stillness, this pure awareness. Beneath our thoughts, behind our thoughts, around our thoughts. It's always there, this pure awareness, which we can call consciousness. It is unchanging. The contents of consciousness change, but the pure awareness itself, consciousness itself, doesn't change. It's unchanging, it's timeless, it's the deathless. It's eternal. We can call that domain a dimension, like time and space, but we'll call it the dimension of eternity. Now, to this, we're going to open up to one more dimension. We'll call that the dimension of will. Our I is our will. The reason we can't put our finger on our I and say, this is my I, is because it acts from another dimension. Our I is not in time and space, and it's not in eternity. When we go back to looking at ourself, this self that we believe in, it's made of thoughts, emotions, patterns. Those are all taking place in time and space. When we look at pure awareness, that's taking place in the dimension of eternity. Our I, the one who is aware, the one who's listening to this and seeing this right now, isn't in time and space, isn't in eternity, is not bound by those. It comes from a different direction, a different dimension. So, this no self, this self that we believe in, doesn't have our I in it. Because in eternity, in time and space, there's no room for I. In the Hindu way of looking at this, once we come into that stillness, that silence, that eternal silence, and out of the ongoing stream of contents of consciousness that makes up our self, once we come out of that, we can begin to open to our big self. And in Western religions, this notion of I is prominent. There's this response, here I am. That occurs a number of times in the Old Testament. When the divine calls to Abraham, Jacob, Moses, Solomon, Isaiah. When they're called on by the sacred, they respond, Hineni, here I am. So clearly, this isn't about no self. It's about I am. And then we take it a little bit further. In the New Testament, there is this, not my will, but thine. Or in the Lord's Prayer, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. So in this dimension of will, we're not just talking about our personal, individual I. We could say that is where the divine will is. that God is will. So if we don't see God around us, if we can't touch God, if it's not obvious where God is, maybe it's something to do with this. Will doesn't come from time and space. It may act in time and space. Will doesn't come from eternity, from that pure awareness, that timeless stillness, the silence, the great silence. It comes from another domain, its own domain. In some circles, this great silence, this unchanging, is considered to be the be-all and end-all, the sacred. And indeed, it matters. But equal in stature, equal in function to that domain of the eternal is the domain of will. So, what's the difference between mindfulness and presence? In mindfulness, the approach is choiceless awareness. Being aware, being open to what's most prominent in our awareness. In presence, we know that choiceless awareness is not truly choiceless. There is a choice, the choice to be aware, the choice to be. It's a fundamental choice. So if you're sitting in that inner stillness in yourself that you find behind all your thoughts, behind all your sensory perceptions, if you're sitting in that inner stillness, just aware, you are choosing to be aware. And there is someone in you, who is aware. That you is your I. And then comes this, not my will, but thine. So we have this individual I, this individuality. Yet we recognize that it is will. And that in that same domain, there is the great will, the will of the Creator, the will of the divine. And that our personal will, our individual will, is fundamentally connected, is an emanation of the divine will. And the freedom that we feel, the freedom that we enjoy and experience and have, is because our will is an emanation of that divine will. The divine is free and gives us our freedom. So looking at reality through that lens helps us answer many questions and clarifies a great deal. We all have this in us. We have this stillness, this pure awareness, and we have this I. Now, how to recognize this I, even though we can't put our finger on it? One way, as we said, was if we're just sitting, it's the one who is, the one who's aware, the one who sees, the one who is witnessing. If we're paying attention, our I is that attention. Attention directs our awareness, influences what we see because it moves our awareness around, opens it, closes it, makes it wider or narrower. That attention is our I. It's an action of our will. Belief. If you believe in your ego, in yourself, if you believe you are this pattern of thoughts and the rest, this personality that's in you, that you've been living with all your life, that belief is your choice. It's your act of will, an act of believing. It's your I, your real I, that is believing and imbuing your ego with some will so that your acts then go through your self-centered ego. That is an aberration. Because in your individuality, you are not self-centered. You are connected with the divine, with the center of all, with the center that is everywhere. So, mindfulness, presence. They're related, almost the same, but not quite the same. Because in presence, it's explicit that at the core of presence is I. I am present. You are present. No self, and I am. They're related. One leads to the other. Self, no self, I am. Thank you.